Hey plant lovers, welcome back. I want to start with a number that surprised me. A mature wisteria vine, the kind you see draped over a pergola in old photographs, can send its roots more than 10 feet down into the ground and spread woody stems 40 feet in every direction. That's a plant that can crack a foundation. That can pull a fence off its posts. And here's the part that stopped me when I first read it. You can grow that same vine in a pot on a third-floor balcony, and it will behave. Think about that for a second. The thing we've been taught to fear about vines, their hunger, their reach, the way they swallow whole sheds if you turn your back on them, is the exact thing that makes them perfect for small spaces. Because a container does something a garden bed never can. It puts a hard wall around the roots. And when you limit the roots, you limit the vine. You take a plant built to conquer, and you turn it into a plant that climbs straight up, exactly where you want it, and stops when it runs out of pot. I researched this for weeks because I kept running into the same frustration that a lot of you have. You live in an apartment, or you have a balcony the size of a doormat, or a concrete patio with no soil at all. And every gardening article seems written for people with a quarter-acre and a south-facing fence. So I went looking for the climbers that genuinely thrive in a pot, the ones that turn a bare railing or a blank brick wall into something alive. And I found more than I expected. Some of them flower all summer. Some of them stay green through winter. Some of them are fragrant enough to scent an entire courtyard from a single container. If you've got vertical space and no ground to plant in, this is the video that changes that. Stick around, because near the end I'll explain the one mistake that kills more potted vines than anything else, and it has nothing to do with watering. Before we get into the plants, I want to give you the one idea that makes all of this make sense. Because once you understand it, you'll stop guessing. Vines don't have stiff trunks. That's the whole trick of them. A tree spends enormous energy building wood strong enough to hold itself up. A vine cheats. It lets something else do the holding, a tree, a wall, a trellis, and pours all of its energy into growing fast and reaching light. That's why vines are some of the fastest growing plants on Earth. They're not wasting resources on support. They're racing upward, borrowing structure as they go. But here's what most people don't know. Not all vines climb the same way. And if you match the climbing style to the wrong support, the plant fails. There are 3 basic methods. Some vines twine, meaning the whole stem spirals around a pole or a wire, wrapping itself like a spring. Some climb with tendrils, little curling threads or modified leaf stalks that shoot out, feel around, and grab anything thin enough to grip. And some are self-clinging, producing tiny aerial rootlets or sticky adhesive pads that cement the plant flat against brick or stone with no support needed at all. This matters more than anything else I'm going to tell you. A twining vine on a flat wall will flop because there's nothing to wrap around. A tendril climber needs something thin, wire, netting, thin trellis slats, because its little grippers can't close around a fat post. And a self-clinging vine on a wooden fence will eventually pry into the gaps and damage it. Get the match right, and the plant climbs itself. Get it wrong, and you'll spend all summer tying stems to a trellis by hand, wondering why nothing wants to grow up. Let me make that concrete, because this is the part that turns a frustrating plant into an easy one. If you've got a smooth brick or stucco wall and nothing to attach to it, you want a self-clinging vine, the kind that glues itself flat. If you've got a railing, an obelisk, or a pole, you want a twiner that can spiral around it. And if you've got a panel of thin trellis or a section of garden netting, that's the home for a tendril climber. The plant is telling you what it needs by how it's built. Once you learn to read that, you stop fighting your vines and start working with them. Keep that in mind as we go, because I'll tell you which type each of these plants is. Let's start with the easiest climbers for shade, the ones that forgive almost everything. English ivy is where most people begin, and for good reason. It's a self-clinging vine, it tolerates deep shade where almost nothing else will climb, and it stays evergreen through the cold. In a wide, shallow container, not a deep, narrow one, it spills and climbs at the same time. One quick warning though, Every part of English ivy is toxic if eaten, so keep it away from curious pets and kids. And because it's self-clinging, never let it attach directly to wood siding or a painted wall. Those rootlets dig in and leave marks. Give it a trellis it can grip instead. Virginia creeper is its showier cousin, and it's native to a huge stretch of the eastern and central United States, so it shrugs off cold that would kill a tropical vine. It climbs with tendrils, tipped in tiny adhesive discs, and that detail is worth pausing on, because it's a different mechanism than ivy's rootlets. Those little discs act like suction cups, pressing flat against a surface and holding without digging in, which makes Virginia creeper gentler on masonry than people expect. The real payoff comes in autumn, when the green foliage turns a deep crimson red that's genuinely striking against a brick wall. It grows fast enough to give you privacy in a single season, which makes it perfect for screening off a balcony from the neighbors. One thing to know going in: the berries are toxic to people, so it's not one for a household where small kids graze on everything. But the birds love them. Climbing hydrangea is the patient one. If you live anywhere in USDA zones 4 through 9, that's most of the continental US outside the far south and the desert southwest, it will reward you, but slowly. It's shade-tolerant, self-clinging, and it can take a couple of years to establish before it really takes off. Once it does, you get lacy white flower clusters in early summer and beautiful peeling bark in winter. It's a plant for people willing to wait. Most aren't, which is exactly why so few people have one. Now let's talk about the flowering vines, the ones that turn a patio into something people stop and stare at. Clematis is the queen of container climbers, and there are hundreds of varieties, so there's one for nearly every situation. It climbs by twisting its leaf stalks around thin supports, which means it needs something slender to grab: wire, netting, or a thin trellis, never a thick post. The flowers can be the size of your palm, in purple, white, pink, even sky blue. But clematis comes with a rule you have to follow. And I want to be careful here, because there's a lot of bad advice floating around about it. You've probably heard the saying, clematis likes its head in the sun and its feet in the shade. For years, gardeners took that to mean you should crowd plants around the base to shade the roots. Here's what I found when I actually dug into the research. Horticulturists at Oregon State University Extension and at Clemson University both recommend keeping the root zone cool, but the smart way to do it isn't crowding the base with competing plants. It's mulch. A 2-inch layer of bark, straw, or even a flat stone over the soil keeps the roots cool and moist without anything fighting the clematis for water and space. Some experienced growers now argue the whole shade the roots idea is overstated to begin with, and that container clematis in dark pots do just fine. So don't stress about it. Mulch the surface, keep the soil from baking, and let the top of the plant climb into the sun. That's it. One more clematis tip that saves people a lot of heartbreak. The crown, the point where the stems meet the roots, should be planted a couple of inches below the soil surface. Why? Because clematis stems are brittle and prone to a sudden wilt, and burying the crown means the plant can re-sprout from below ground if the top gets damaged. That single trick has saved more clematis than any fertilizer ever has. Climbing roses bring that classic romantic look. And yes, they grow in pots if you give them a big enough one and prune them regularly. They don't actually climb on their own, no tendrils, no twining, so you have to tie the canes to a support as they grow. The reward is repeat blooms all season from modern varieties and, in many of them, real fragrance. Choose a container at least the size of a half wine barrel because roses are hungry and they resent cramped roots. Now, fragrance. If you want a balcony that stops people mid-step on a warm evening because of how it smells, you want jasmine. Star jasmine, sometimes sold as Confederate jasmine, is a twining evergreen that produces small, intensely scented, white star-shaped flowers in late spring and early summer. It's resilient, taking heat, humidity, and short dry spells once established. It grows fast, so plan to prune it little and often to keep it compact. Just snip stems above a bud and it bushes out. Plant it in full sun against a thin trellis or railing it can twine around, and on the right evening, a single potted plant will perfume an entire courtyard. Common jasmine is the other one to know. It blooms in summer in cool climates and nearly year-round in warm, frost-free ones. It needs well-draining soil and warmth, and it gives you that heavy, sweet night fragrance people associate with the tropics. Honeysuckle is the hummingbird magnet. Most varieties stay evergreen in warmer climates, and in pots they want full sun and regular water. It's a twining vine, so give it something to wrap around. The tubular flowers feed pollinators all season, and there are well-behaved native types that won't take over the way the invasive Japanese honeysuckle does. So check the label and choose a native variety if you can. Mandevilla is your tropical showstopper for a hot, sunny balcony. It produces clusters of big, trumpet-shaped flowers in pink, white, and red, and it loves full sun and well-draining soil. In most of the U.S., it's grown as a warm-season plant and brought in or replaced when frost comes. If you have a blazing south-facing patio that fries other plants, this is the one that thrives there. Let me give you a few annual vines now, because these are the ones I'd hand to a complete beginner. They grow from seed, they're cheap, they ask almost nothing, and they explode with color in a single season. Morning Glory is the classic. This old-fashioned vine is so easy, it will grow in a standard 12-inch pot, twining up any string or trellis you give it, and unfurling trumpet-shaped blooms in blue, purple, pink, and white that open with the sunrise. Plant the seeds after your last frost, give it full sun, and stand back. Moonflower is its night shift sibling, and this one I love for a specific reason. It's a night-blooming vine with huge, white trumpet-shaped flowers that open after dusk and release a lemony fragrance. Place the pot near a bedroom window or beside where you sit on summer evenings, and the flowers open right as you'd be out there to enjoy them. It's a plant designed, almost, for people who only get home after dark. Black-eyed Susan vine is the cheerful one. It's tender, grown as an annual in most of the country, and it covers a trellis in warm-toned flowers with dark centers all summer. It needs a sunny spot and something thin to climb, and it doubles as a privacy screen on a railing. Sweet pea rounds out the annuals, and it's all about fragrance and old-fashioned charm. It produces ruffled flowers in white, pink, red, and purple, and the scent is unmistakable. For containers, choose the bush-type varieties rather than the tall climbers, and grow them in the cooler shoulder seasons, spring in most of the country, fall and winter in mild winter zones like coastal California and the Gulf South. Sweet peas hate heat, so timing is everything. If you've made it this far, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I put real research into every one of these. Real extension service sources. Real botany, not just recycled lists. And subscribing is the only way the channel keeps reaching people who actually want to grow things. It's free, and it tells me to keep making these. Now let me cover a few more unusual climbers. The ones that make people ask, what is that? Bougainvillea isn't technically a vine. It's a climbing shrub. But it's one of the great container plants for a reason. Those vivid, papery bracts in magenta, pink, orange, and white aren't even the flowers. They're modified leaves surrounding tiny, true flowers. It's sun-loving and drought-tolerant, which makes it almost ideal for a pot. Because here's the strange thing about bougainvillea. It blooms best when it's slightly stressed. Keep it a little root-bound, a little dry and full of sun, and it explodes with color. Hamper it, and you'll get all leaves and no bracts. That counterintuitive fact is exactly why so many people fail with it. Passion flower is for when you want something that looks almost alien. The flowers are intricate, structured, unlike anything else, and the vine climbs with tendrils, so give it netting or thin wire. It needs plenty of sun, some species even fruit. It's the plant that turns a balcony into a conversation. Trumpet vine deserves a mention with a warning attached. In the open ground, it's notoriously aggressive. A single plant can put on 40 feet of growth in a year, which is why some gardeners treat it as invasive. But, and this is the whole point of today, in a container, that vigor gets reined in. A horticulturist from Wisconsin, Katie Sunderledge, points out that growing it in a pot is precisely how you limit a vine that would otherwise run wild. You get the fiery orange tubular flowers and the clouds of hummingbirds, without the takeover. It's the perfect illustration of the container principle. The pot is the leash. Acacia, the chocolate vine, is the one almost nobody grows, and probably should. In spring, it produces clusters of hanging deep purple flowers with a soft vanilla chocolate scent, hence the name. It's adaptable, handling both full sun and partial shade, and it's hardy down to around zone 5, which is colder than most fragrant vines will take. Cut it back after flowering to keep it in bounds, and you have a fragrant, unusual, genuinely cold, tough climber that none of your neighbors will recognize. Now, the mistake I promised you. The one that kills more potted vines than overwatering, underwatering, bad light, or anything else. It's the container itself, specifically the size of it and what happens underneath. Here's the thing nobody tells you. A vine is built to grow large. Even a container-restricted vine wants a real root run. When you plant a vigorous climber in a pot that's too small, the roots circle, the soil dries out within hours on a hot day, and the plant either starves or cooks. People see the wilting leaves and assume they're underwatering, so they water more, and now the roots are sitting in soggy soil with nowhere for the water to escape, and they rot. The plant dies, and the gardener swears off vines forever, convinced they have a black thumb. The fix is two things, and they're simple. First, go bigger than you think. For most perennial vines, clematis, jasmine, climbing roses, you want a container at least 15 to 18 inches across and just as deep. A half wine barrel is ideal for the hungry ones. Bigger pots hold more soil, which means more water reserve and a more stable root temperature, so the plant isn't whipping between drought and drowning every single day. Here's the physics of why that works, in plain terms. A small pot has very little soil, so it holds very little water, and it heats up and cools down fast because there's nothing to buffer it. On a 90-degree afternoon, a 1-gallon pot in full sun can go bone dry in a matter of hours, and the root ball can climb to temperatures that actually cook the fine feeder roots. A large pot is the opposite. More soil means more water held in reserve, and that mass of damp soil resists temperature swings the way a big lake stays cool while a puddle boils. You water less often, the roots stay in a steadier zone, and the plant stops lurching from crisis to crisis. For a vine that wants to grow big and fast, that stability is everything. Second, drainage. The pot must have holes, real ones, and the water must be able to leave. A vine sitting in a saucer full of standing water is a vine drowning slowly. Don't put a layer of gravel in the bottom thinking it helps drainage. That's an old myth that actually makes things worse by raising the water line in the soil. Just use a good quality potting mix, not garden soil, which compacts into concrete in a pot, and make sure the holes are open. Get those two things right, the right-sized pot and real drainage, and combine them with the right support for how each vine climbs, and you've solved 90% of what goes wrong. Everything else is just choosing a plant you love. One more thing that ties it all together, because it's where most people quietly fail after the first season. A vine in a pot eats through its nutrients far faster than one in the ground, because there's no surrounding earth to draw from, and every watering flushes a little fertility out the drainage holes. So a container vine needs feeding the ground-grown version never asks for. For the flowering ones, clematis, roses, mandevilla, a balanced liquid fertilizer every couple of weeks through the growing season keeps the blooms coming. You can find everything you need at a Home Depot or Lowe's garden center. A bag of quality potting mix, a slow-release granular feed, and a liquid bloom fertilizer for the flush. Skip the feeding, and your vine will grow leaves and refuse to flower, and you'll blame the plant when it was only ever hungry. And put the support in on day 1. Don't wait until the vine is sprawling and then try to wrestle it onto a trellis. You'll snap stems and lose flowers. Set the obelisk, the netting, or the trellis into the pot at planting time, while the plant is small, and guide the first few shoots onto it by hand. After that, a twiner or tendril climber takes over and does the rest itself. So let me bring this home. You don't need land. You don't need a fence or a yard, or even soil in the ground. You need a pot, the right size, a support that matches how your vine climbs, and a sunny or shady spot depending on what you chose. That's the whole game. A morning glory from a seed packet and a length of string will turn a bare railing into a wall of blue flowers by August. A clematis, with its crown buried 2 inches deep and its roots mulched cool, will hand you flowers the size of your palm. A potted star jasmine on a warm evening will do something to a small balcony that no candle or diffuser ever could. The vine you were taught to fear, the one that swallows, sheds, and cracks foundations, becomes, in a pot, the most rewarding plant you can grow in a small space. All that vigor, all that reach, pointed straight up, exactly where you want it. If this gave you an idea for your own balcony or patio, drop a comment and tell me which vine you're going to try first. I read them, and the ones people are most curious about become the next deep dive video. Take care of your plants.